Okay.
Hello and welcome everyone. I am Sunshine Lovelace with Outdoor Chattanooga. For those that don't know, Outdoor Chattanooga is a unique division within the city of Chattanooga's Economic and Community Development Department. Basically, our mission is to connect you with the outdoors. We do that by promoting all the recreational opportunities within about an hour's drive of Chattanooga, the city center. And we offer programs such as workshops like this to help encourage you, inspire you to get outside and play. So this evening we are teaching a workshop on wilderness survival, shelter building, emergency shelter building 101. Cole is our awesome presenter tonight. He's an avid outdoorsman, awesome kayaker, a pretty good mountain biker. No, I'm just kidding. He's really good at all the outdoor things. And he is going to run through a presentation and then we will open it up for questions. Actually, there's a Q&A function at the bottom. I want you guys to ask your questions at any point during the workshop. We will just save up answering them towards the end. If you have any issues with operating Zoom or anything else, I'm going to be your moderator this evening, and you can type that into the chat. For those of you that can't find the chat or the Q&A, hover your cursor over your desktop or laptop, and it should pull up the menu bar at the bottom of your screen, and you should be able to type into there. If you're on mobile, if you're on your cell phone, you should be able to tap your screen and have a small menu bar at the bottom of your mobile device that will pull up those same options for you. But again, if you guys have any issues, just type that into the chat. Please sign in. Let us know you joining us this evening. If you want a sticker, request that by putting in your mailing address. And at the end of this webinar, we will give away a free map and compass navigation course from our friends at REI. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cole. He's going to take it away, and we hope you guys learned something valuable this evening. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. So let's get this thing started. Tonight, we're going to be doing just a small segment of wilderness survival. And as you know, it will be on shelter building. I'm not going to get too lost in the weeds of long-term shelter building tonight. We're going to be particularly talking about emergency shelter building. So, you know, quick shelters that you could put up in an emergency if you had to stay overnight in the woods. A lot of these are pretty easy to do, but maybe you haven't thought about the kinds of gear that you would need to set that up, or some of the natural resources that would be in nature that you can use to build your own shelter. So without further ado, let me share my screen here and we will get this thing started. So what do you think, Sunshine? Should we hit them with a polling question to get everybody interacting, kind of see what everybody knows?
Yeah, let's do it. We can start with the first one. So guys, it should pop up on your screen a question that Cole would like to ask. It's just a way for us to kind of get to know you guys and where we're starting from. So when you're lost in the wilderness, what is the first thing you should do? You guys answer with whatever answer you think is correct. We're going to share the responses. I'm going to leave this up for about a minute and just kind of see what everyone thinks on this one. So when you're lost in the wilderness, what is the first thing you should do? Yell for help, find water, make a shelter, or maybe just sit for a minute and collect your thoughts. Looks like we got about 80% of the votes in, 85% of people have voted. Give it a couple more seconds. For our first polling question, sometimes it takes people just a second to figure out how to answer. All right, we got about 90% voted. I'm going to share the results so everyone can see.
Yes, everybody is on the same page. It looks like
How'd
the majority.
How'd they do?
I think they did very well. There were some funny answers. I guess we had some small percentages of yell for help. You know, if you were in a group and you got lost or separated from your group and you knew they weren't far, yelling for help may not be a bad idea. Finding water could be good depending on the circumstances, but the right answer is sit for a minute and collect your thoughts. We're going to talk about an acronym it's called STOP. And the acronyms for stop would be, the S is sit down, and the T is think about your surroundings, think about where you're at, think about how did you get there, what's the first thing you should do. The O is observe. You want to observe your surroundings, think about what terrain you're looking at, how far you might have gotten off the trail, if anything looks familiar. And then you want to start making a plan. So that STOP acronym is something you can use if you find yourself lost or just confused on where you're at on the trail. Sit down, collect your thoughts, and just be patient. Don't let panic set in. That's the first thing that causes an emergency situation in wilderness survival. If you go into panic mode, it is never going to end well. So yeah, y'all did it. You got it right. So I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation. I think I can start clicking through the slides here. All right. So this is just a diagram of some things to know when you're out there in the survival. So you can survive 3 minutes without air if you're calm. That panic situation can also really change all of these factors if you were to go into panic mode and allow yourself to get overwhelmed with the circumstances. So always stay calm, and these things will play out. So 3 hours without shelter. That's also depending on the environment, maybe how cold it is, inclement weather, if it's raining. There's always different circumstances, but shelter is usually the first thing you want to think about if you're going to be spending the night in the wild somewhere. 3 days without water. That could be a little bit varied depending on how much energy output you're putting, towards either building a shelter or looking for water, or maybe trying to find the trail. If you expend a lot of energy, that water need could change. But if you are staying in one place, which is what a lot of experts tell you to do, if you're not able to get a grip on your surroundings and figure out where you might have wandered off to, staying in one place is always recommended by experts that know these situations, and usually you can gather your thoughts better, you can get a better feel of the area, and then most of the time help is going to come. Somebody's going to know that you're out there. But 3 weeks without food, another thing to think about with the food part, a lot of people think the food is a very important part in survival, and it's really the last piece of survival. Most wilderness survival scenarios don't last more than a couple of days. Rescue teams in most parks are going to be on it. Hopefully you've left a note or let a friend know where you're at. If you got yourself in a situation where you needed to stay overnight for 2 or 3 nights, help is probably going to be on the way if you've let somebody know that you're in a particular area. So getting food is not necessary in the present moment. I would think more about building a shelter, building a fire, then thinking about water. And if you were out there for more than a week, you are going to have to think about food, but most of the time that's a lower percentage chance. So moving on. So a lot of things in the wilderness survival situations have to do with your mindset. And we talked a little bit about that in regards to going into panic mode and how that can affect the body, how that can affect your decision making. And technology really has made us very lazy, as we all know, but it also makes us unaware of our basic navigational skills that we just naturally have just by staring at our phones and using these just perfect lines on maps to follow. And we really aren't following the lines. We're just listening to a robot tell us where to go, turn left, turn right, and completely disregarding all of our basic navigational awareness skills that we would learn. So it's just something to think about. Learn how to use a map. That is a course that we offer. And if you ever get a chance to take a map and compass class, that is something we're offering for the reward of this class. And if you get that, you will love it. It's a great resource. Really good to know how to read a map, especially topographical lines and using a compass and being able to navigate yourself through a wilderness with those skills. Great skills to have. People think that help is just a phone call away. What happens when there's no service? There's a lot of parks that you're going to be in, or natural areas that you're going to be in where there's no service, and then there's no way to make a phone call to get help. So having that map, having either your phone with a map on it with plenty of battery, or maybe a backup battery charger in case your phone died. Being prepared is the most important thing. And we'll talk about some of those preparations that you can do beforehand to prevent the chance of this situation happening. A lot of these reality television shows, when it comes to wilderness survival, just paint a different picture of what survival looks like. And I think it can be misconstrued and misunderstood in a lot of ways, with thinking that food's important, thinking that you need to have these bushcraft skills and be able to have an axe and build this huge log cabin in the woods. That's probably never going to happen. So understanding the basics of it is very important. I know that Sunshine did a hiking class, and she talked a little bit about apps that you can use for hiking. I'm not going to go into super big detail on these apps, and I'm not biased towards one or the other. I do use AllTrails more than I use the other ones, but they're all very similar, structured the same. But AllTrails is a great app to use. Gaia is another good one. REI has one called the Hiking Project. You can do a basic subscription that's for free, and you basically get access to trails anywhere in your area. Or if you're traveling, you can basically search the city that you're in and look for trails nearby. What's really cool about it is you can get on and read about the trail, read about the difficulty, the mileage, the elevation. You can read reviews on some of the conditions of the trail, whether or not it's been cleaned. If trees are down, if it's bad, if there's been bad weather, all kinds of different things. But if you really want to get the subscription for AllTrails, I believe it's like $29.99, and it does give you the possibility, or not possibility, it gives you the option to have maps downloaded to your phone, and you can always have them whenever you need them without having service. And you can also track yourself while you're on a certain trail system if you've paid that subscription, and know exactly where you're at. Now, even with the free based program, you can still basically access and see the maps, but you can't download the maps to have them at a moment's notice. So anyways, those are some things to think about if you do want to have your phone and use that as your map resources. These are some apps to use for hiking. So let's get into the observing your surroundings part when we talked about that STOP acronym. So wide angle vision, awareness on the trail, is very important. Wide angle vision is basically being able to open your peripheral vision while you're walking on the trail, really taking in your surroundings, noticing any unique features in the trail, rocks, trees, moss, a weird deformity in a tree, maybe getting into actual trail built features. You might see rock piles that indicate a turn or that you're on the right trail or an intersection, looking for blazes, looking for trail markers. These are all things that wide angle vision really allows you to open up your awareness while on the trail. Slowing things down, taking in your surroundings. If you did get off the trail, always stay calm, always start to think, where is the last place I remember seeing the trail? Observe where you're at and take your time and backtrack. Signs on the trail, we talked about that really quickly, but rock piles, stacked wood. If you saw a log that, say you came to an intersection, there's a left and there's a right, and the right-hand turn has a log over it, not most of the time that's there for a reason. They've blocked it off so that to go left. It could be a fallen tree, but then you can also look at the foot traffic of how many people probably went over that right side. And if it looks like a lot of people are going right, maybe that is the right direction. But always take in, how much foot traffic looks like it's been used on the trail. If the left side looks like more people are going that way, that's probably the way to go. And then also looking for blazes, looking for any, national park signs or just trail system signs. Those are always important to look for. So these are just some things to think about when it comes to certifications and training that will better equip you for a survival situation. I myself have a wilderness first aid certification, and I had it done through the Solo Southeast program, which is hosted by Nantahala Outdoor Center. That's only about 2.5 hours from us towards Bryson City, North Carolina. But if you were wanting to really have some great skills that are not only great for first aid, but just good skills to know while, out in the wilderness hiking with groups that could help in emergency situation, these are great certifications to have and will really just allow you, more opportunity to help somebody in the event of an emergency. So there's also the Wilderness First Responder certification. That's a really in-depth certification that allows you to have pretty much every feather in your cap that you would need for an emergency. So I would highly recommend either getting a basic first aid and CPR, certification through, a place locally, if you could get that. But if you wanted to really understand emergency situations in the wilderness, just a basic wilderness first aid program is great. And it will open your mind to a lot more possibilities that could happen while out on a hiking trip. So I think the most important part to preventing these situations is planning ahead. Everyone knows that. You think that you're prepared, you're rushing to go to this incredible destination, whether it be a hike to a beautiful view, and you're rushing out the door, grabbing whatever food you can find, maybe a minimal amount of water. Most people don't think about having a space blanket in case they got lost and needed to get in something to stay warm. Most people don't think about having that first aid kit because they've not ever had someone break a leg or had someone gash their leg and need bandaging. They haven't experienced it, so they don't perceive the chance of it happening. But it doesn't mean it can't happen or might happen eventually. So planning really in depth before you go on an adventure is very important. Know the area that you're going. That means having a map. That means knowing the distance, knowing the elevation, knowing who you're going with, the people's experience you're going with. All of this, all of these things, are very important to think through before going out on your trip. So, and also knowing the weather. Weather is very important. That could change in a moment's notice if you didn't prepare for it. A lot of time in the mountains, if you've looked at weather in the city nearby the mountain, it could be completely different. I almost always have a rain jacket or a windbreaker or something packed in the event that, winds pick up, the temperature drops, or say a rainstorm moves in sporadically and I need to just have a rain jacket. At least I've got it in my pack. Just in case weather changed and I don't want to start going into hypothermia or being really cold. It's always nice to be prepared. So having that extra gear will help you in case something changes out there. And in nature, nothing is predictable. You can't ever really know what's going to happen. So this is not going to be an in-depth teaching of how to read a topo map. I really just want everyone to watch this video just for the basics of reading a topo map. Hopefully one day we can have another map and compass in detail class where if you want to, learn just a lot of the details about how to read a map, it would be a great skill to have. But this is just a basic video and we'll start it off, let you watch it and see what you think.
Topographic maps are a little different from your average map. Not only do they show the location of things like roads and trails, but once you get the hang of reading them, they also help you visualize three-dimensional terrain from a flat piece of paper. Topo maps use three main mechanisms to describe the terrain. In this video, we're going to cover how to read the map's contour lines, how to understand scale, and how to read the symbols and colors found in the map's legend. Contour lines are what really make topographic maps something special. These lines connect all the points on the map that share the same elevation. By looking at how the contour lines spread out and come together, you can get a good sense of what the terrain looks like. When the lines are packed close together, that tells you that the elevation is changing a lot in a short distance, so the terrain is quite steep. As the lines spread out, the elevation changes more slowly, so the slope is more mellow. Contour lines can also help you visualize the shape of the terrain. For example, as the lines form smaller and smaller circles, they're probably showing a peak. Spend some time with a map of a familiar area and see if you can pick out terrain features just by looking at the contour lines. Every fifth contour line on a topo map is thicker than the others, and those thick lines are called index lines. At some point along every index line, you'll find the elevation for that line written on the map. The change in elevation from one contour line to the next is always the same on the map, and most maps have either a 40 or 80-foot contour interval. If your map has an 80-foot interval, that means that each contour line is 80 vertical feet away from the next. You can find all the specific details about the contour intervals and index lines for your map in its legend. Scale refers to the relative distance of the map. For instance, this map scale is 1 to 12,000. That means that 1 inch on the map represents 12,000 inches in reality. Another map of the same region is 1 to 50,000 and covers a larger area, but in less detail. The important thing is that the map with a smaller scale will show a smaller area, but with more detail. Understanding the level of detail on your map is handy when planning your route, but it isn't much help if you want to calculate distances efficiently. That's why maps also have a small representative scale near their legend. This scale shows you the relative distance of a mile or a kilometer on your map, and you can use the edge of a compass or even a piece of string to help figure out just how far away that peak is. One of the first things to look for on any new map is the legend. The legend is like the user's guide for your map. It's where the various lines, colors, and symbols are defined. When it comes to the colors on the map, the idea is that the darker the color, the denser the vegetation. As you get closer to the top of a peak, you'll notice that the colors get lighter as the forest thins out. And of course, streams and lakes are represented in blue. Alongside the list of symbols, there are a few other important pieces of information, like details about the contour lines and the date of the map's most recent revision. This is also where you'll find the magnetic declination for the region, which you'll use to set up your compass. When you combine your understanding of contour lines, scale, and your map's symbols and colors, you can almost visualize your whole trip before you go. The next step in becoming a backcountry navigator is to learn how to use your compass alongside your map. So click here to check out that video, or click here to find a navigation class near you.
A real quick poll, I'm going to interject. If anyone else is having issues with the video, either kind of being jumbled or the audio not playing well, please type in the chat, let us know. Anyone having issues with the sign-in link, I'm reposting that. It looks like I have over 50 people signed in. So it's working. That link has worked for the majority. But if you are still having issues, type it in the chat and I'll see what I can work out for you. All right, Cole, take it away.
Awesome. All right, so I hope that you learned a little bit from that. Reading topographical maps is not an easy thing to describe over a virtual platform, but that was a very basic run through of reading topo maps and using a compass. And we hope that we can offer that soon. If we do, you need to come out and check it out. It's a great skill to have. Moving on. So the big 7, these are things to think about. Stop, think, observe, plan. These are 7 important things if you're, in a situation where you believe you're lost. So stop, think, observe, plan. If you've injured yourself, sprained an ankle, put your shoulder out, anything like that, say someone in your group falls and they've busted their leg, providing first aid is essential. If you believe that finding the trail is not possible or it's too dark and you're not prepared, seeking shelter is a very important thing. Important for a lot of reasons, mainly because it's going to provide a sense of security. It will give you a feeling of hope, really. If you were out in the wilderness without anything over your head in the middle of the night, it's going to be really hard to keep good spirits and to keep yourself in a balanced mental state to make good decisions. So having that shelter built could be the difference between your survival. And then building a fire, that can also have to do with how cold it might be. If it was very cold and you'd finish the shelter and you realize, I don't know how warm I'm going to be tonight, I probably need to look at building a fire. That's the second most important thing that you could do. So that might be something to think about. Signaling for help. That's really dependent on where you're at, how long you've been there. And also, if you could hear somebody way down the mountain and you thought that shouting for help, do it. Anything that's going to provide the chance of someone finding you, use your intuition and make the best decision for that situation. Drink water if you have it. Usually that comes after you've built the shelter, you've had a fire. If you're getting to that point where you realize you're going into dehydration, or you're just getting to that point, then finding water and boiling it over the fire. Or if you've planned well, maybe you have some iodine tablets in your backpack and you can purify the water, which would be ideal. And I always carry some type of purification in my pack, just as a backup plan. Food, don't even worry about it. And we're not even going to talk about that. So what are the primary causes of survival? I promise we're going to get to the shelters. We're still trying to cover some basics here. So not having good leadership in your group, being in poor physical condition, wearing the wrong clothing or footwear, lacking motivation. That's another important thing. You'll hear a lot of survival experts say that you've got to have the will and the want to get yourself through a tough situation. If you've sprained your ankle, it's coming close to nightfall and the temperature's dropping, you've got to be willing to crawl on your knees and pull yourself to a place where you can build a shelter, get warm, or maybe make a fire if it came down to it. You've got to have that motivation and will to want to live. If you don't have that, you're out of luck. You're probably going to be in a bad situation. So not eating enough while you're on the trail, not carving up or eating the right amount of calories while out there, that could be a deal breaker for someone getting in a bad situation. I've seen that before in a guy that was in a survival situation and we were able to save him. He probably would have not made it if we had not been there for him, but he had not eaten enough food through the day. His group didn't really take note of that, didn't really watch him throughout the day, and his health declined. He got to where he had no energy, could not walk, and we had to buddy carry him several miles to get him to a location where he could get comfortable again and get warm. So make sure you've got some extra power bars, just some extra food in your backpack in case you might need it. Becoming too tired, too cold, thirsty, not recognizing and dealing with a potential problem. In the situation I just said that we helped the guy in, his group didn't identify that he was in critical condition and put him in a really bad situation by not being team players and helping him out. So just always be aware of your group dynamic and the people around you and try to help when you can. Encountering unexpected changes in the weather or unexpected terrain, that gets back to preparation. If you didn't have a rain jacket and it's pouring down rain, temperature drops 15, 20 degrees, it could put you in a very, very vulnerable position. So getting back to preparation again, very important. Quick video, what to bring in your pack. This is a really cool video that REI made, and I think it's helpful.
People often go day hiking unprepared. It's important to bring the 10 essentials with you so you can stay safe while on trail. Here's the deal on what I like to take on a day hike. So I've got a couple different things in front of me, and these are all of the 10 essentials. So first you'll see that I have navigation, so that's a compass and a map of the area where I'll be hiking. And then I also have my headlamp just in case I'm going early in the morning or staying out later than I intend to. Here I have sun protection, so my sunglasses and a sun hat to protect my face. And then I also have my first aid kit, as well as some waterproof matches and a knife. This is a space blanket, so this is just some sort of emergency shelter. Again, this is all just in case you get caught out longer than you intend to be in the wilderness. Then over here I have extra food, bars and snacks, as well as lots of water and extra clothes. This will totally depend on what the weather conditions are. You might be bringing a fleece, an insulated jacket, or a rain jacket, depending on where you're going to be hiking. There's a couple other things that I like to bring with me on a day hike. One is my pee rag. I use this instead of toilet paper, and then I just tie it on the outside of my pack and let it air out. I also bring my cell phone, and this is just what I use to take photos when I am on my hike. One thing that I really love to have on trail is my watch. This is just a standard watch that has a GPS feature in it. It's an activity watch, and I really like to be able to track my mileage from the trailhead. And for me, it helps me feel a little bit safer to know where it is that I'm navigating. So let's really quick talk about what I'm wearing. I have a wicking wool t-shirt on. Any sort of wicking comfortable shirt will do. And again, whether it's tank top or long sleeve shirt, it's going to depend on the weather. And then I have a buff around my neck. I like to use this to keep sweat out of my face, but it's also really great as a napkin at lunchtime. And I'm wearing just a durable, quick dry shorts. And on my feet, I have my hiking boots and my hiking socks. There are a couple other things that I like to leave in my car for when I get back from the hike. So I have sandals to change into and an extra pair of socks, which feels really great after a long hike. And then I also have my coffee canister. I'll either fill this up before the hike or afterwards to get a little pick-me-up before the long drive home. It's also a good idea to leave a copy of your itinerary in your car, as well as a copy with a friend. And that's just in case something happens to you and people need to know where you've been. That about covers it. I hope this helps. Depending on conditions, you might pack a lot more on your day hike.
So if you think about the last thing she said leave an itinerary with a friend, let them know where you're going to be, or leave one in your car. This is very important. This could actually help you if you got lost and say, you weren't able to signal for help, you were never able to find the trail, and you were out, say you thought you could be out there for weeks. That would never happen if you'd left your itinerary or let a friend know where you're going to be. There's a lot of examples. I listened to a podcast recently on Outside Magazine about a surfer that had failed to let any of his friends and family know where he was going surfing, got swept out into the ocean, and found himself out there for 2 nights. Luckily, he was supposed to work the next day, and after he didn't show up to work, his coworkers thought, well, I bet he went surfing. And they figured out that he had gone to a certain location, and almost 3 days later, emergency services were able to find him at the brink of death. So if he'd let somebody know where he was, he probably would have been found the night that he had been stranded out there, and he would have been fine. So just always think about letting a friend or family member know, or just put an itinerary right in your dashboard, right, and under your front windshield, and make sure someone knows where you're at in case something happened. Very important. So moving on, we're just going to cover this again so you can hear it again. Combustion, having a lighter in your bag. I always have that. Waterproof matches if you want to. Flint and steel, you'll hear Bear Grylls and other survivors say it. If you want to get raw about it, flint and steel is the most reliable, they say, to use if you couldn't get a lighter to work or your matches got wet. The flint and steel is always going to be reliable if you know how to use it. So practicing that, if you did have it, would help you be able to use it if you did have it. Hydration, like I said, iodine tablets or a filter. If you had to, boiling water also works. If you could make a fire, boil the water. Nutrition, extra power bars, something in your bag, GPS phone, or having a physical map. Also, if I know I'm going on a long hike and there's a chance, if I'm relying on my phone for the map, I will make sure I have a rechargeable battery in my backpack that I could plug it into if I needed to. And that's only if I'm relying on my phone. If I had a physical map, I may not have the battery, but just depends on what you're doing and how far you're going. Illumination, I like headlights. You really just don't see a lot of flashlights if you're out backpacking or on a day trip. Have a headlight and bring extra batteries. That's another thing to think about. I always have extra batteries in my day pack just in case my headlamp didn't work at night for some odd reason. So just a good backup. Tool repair kit, having a knife. I think a knife is very important. Duct tape, needle and thread. You can have those things. It's great to have if you really needed it in a survival situation. And that really would just be if you were stuck out there for weeks. So that really gets into the weeds, like I said, of trying to find food. But having a knife is important. A knife can be very resourceful for, shaving off bark, cutting rope, all kinds of different things. First aid kit. Insulation, depending on where you're at, temperature, emergency shelter, space blankets. You can find those at REI. If you didn't want to pay for a space blanket, you could get a garbage bag or have a poncho. Those are also useful. Sun protection, she said sunglasses, sunscreen. If you're in hot environments, that is very important to probably keeping your temperature down a little bit if you were going to be sweating all day, and it would also keep you from getting very sunburned. So Sunshine, the amazing marketing whiz that she is, put this video together. And the person behind the camera was my father, and he is not the most savvy cameraman in the world. So forgive us for my head being cut off in some shots, but it doesn't take away from the information that we wanted to share with you about building an A-frame shelter. So this video is going to talk about an A-frame shelter with paracord and a tarp. There are different tarps out there. I won't discuss all of them, but there's a lot that you can look up that are great wilderness survival tarps that you could keep in your pack. But I'm using a very big tarp just as an example. Some people do carry them, but it's just a lot of weight and a lot of mass in your backpack. So you can buy very small ones too. But we're going to kick this thing off, and I hope you enjoy the video. How's it going? This is Cole Henderson with Outdoor Chattanooga. Today's segment is going to be about wilderness survival, and particularly we're going to be talking about wilderness shelters today. The first type of shelter that I want to kind of introduce to you is right behind me. What we have here is an A-frame tarp shelter. Obviously this is going to be a little bit exaggerated. You might not want to carry a heavyweight tarp that's this big, but in most wilderness survival scenarios, it's always good to have either a really lightweight small tarp that you could build an A-frame shelter out of, and have some rope, have some paracord, which is what I have right here on these trees, and have a knife too in case you need to cut the rope and size it up depending on how much length you need to build your shelter. An A-frame tarp shelter is a quick shelter that you can build when you're looking to just get underneath something and be dry in case it's raining, and it gives you just a feeling of comfort, stability, a lot of things that you need when you're in a survival situation. So a couple of things here. You want to make sure, depending on the temperature, depending on the wind that you might have, in just a moment we're going to show you the reason that I set this A-frame up in the area that I'm at. A lot of reasons for setting up your shelter have to do with wind coverage. You want to make sure that you're in an area that's low and away from where that wind is going to be coming over. So the area that I've picked is actually in a low sitting area that's kind of embankments around me. And I know that the wind is going to go up and over those embankments and not be hitting my shelter too much. One thing that I could do though, if it was coming into the shelter and I want to just have more coverage and more closure with the shelter, I've got these staked with sticks. I can pull these stakes in and actually fold this part in, and I can kind of burrito myself into this shelter to make sure I don't have wind coming in this end or on the other end. So one thing to think about when you're trying to stake your tarp to the ground, I've actually got holes in this tarp, so I've used small little sticks to stake these holes down into the ground. If you didn't have the holes on your tarp, another thing that you could do is use medium-sized logs to weight down that side of the tarp so that it stays down on the ground and doesn't lift in the middle of the night. Or you can use rocks, really anything that you can actually make the tarp sit down and not fly up while you're sleeping at night. So another really important piece to have in your survival bag, in my opinion, what I like to have on me at all times, have a good knife. Have a knife that's sharp in case you need to shave sticks to make tinder for a fire, or if you needed to cut your rope and size it up to build a shelter or to tie something else. Always have a knife, always have some good paracord or just any kind of rope that's going to be sturdy, durable rope. But right now I'm going to actually give you an example on how to tie the line across to build an A-frame. All you want to do is you want to make sure you have a nice tail end length coming out right here. And then I'm just going to do some basic overhand knots. These are really easy, everybody can follow. So right now I've got the tail end on top. I'm just going to go underneath, pull that tail end through, and then tighten it up. And then this tail end, I'm going to swing it around one more time. And what this is going to do is just going to add another bit of stability and make sure it stays nice and tight. One more overhand knot, and just to make sure, one more overhand after that. And then what I've got, a nice, stable, tight knot that's not going to come undone. So another aspect of the A-frame, you want to make sure that depending on the tarp length that you have, that you don't go too long for the trees that you're setting up your line across for the A-frame part. This is actually the right length for the tarp that I have, but make sure that you pick the right size of tree distance where you're going to tie your line. So this is perfect for the tarp that I have. And then also height is a key. If you really want to make sure that wind isn't a big factor in blowing your tarp around, you may want to set your line a little bit lower, which would mean you could stay lower on the tree, which will allow you to, you know, kind of stake down that tarp a little bit easier when you're setting it up for the A-frame. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to tie a trucker's hitch, and what that's going to allow me to do is make sure I have really good leverage and I can tighten up this line when I go around the tree to make sure it's nice and stable when I set that tarp over it. So what I've got here, I'm going to kind of pinch one side with my left hand, going to make a loop like this over the top, and then I'm going to pinch both ends together like that and twist this loop once, twice, okay? And then this end that's still in my right hand, I'm going to feed it through that loop and then pull. Now what I've got here, that's just a basic trucker's hitch. So to continue on this frame portion with the paracord, what I've done, I've tied my trucker's hitch here, and I've taken this tail end, I've gone around the tree. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this tail end through that loop, the trucker's hitch loop that I've made. I'm going to pull all that slack through and get where I have some tension. I'm going to set it up at the height I want. This is about the height I want. So now what I have, and the reason I've done this trucker's hitch, is I have leverage to pull it as tight as I need it to. Now it's not going to bounce much. It's not going to really drop down much when I put that tarp on it and it starts to weight. So it's really good and sturdy. So I've got that nice tight leverage that I want. I'm going to pinch the end closest to that loop where the trucker's hitch and this tail end is coming through. Pinch it right next to that loop. And then all I'm going to do, you can actually just tie an overhand knot again if you want to. But what I like to do is take this tail end, feed it through. I've got a loop here now, and then pull it towards that trucker's hitch. And bam, I've got a nice closed knot. And if I wanted to make sure that knot is not going to come undone, all I could do is take this, go around, come back through, and pull it one more time, and then that is not going to come undone. And then what I really like about this the most is that I can undo it very easily if I need to take it down. It's not hard to just untie a knot that's really tight. So now I've got that undone, and all I need to do, if I wanted to take this whole thing down, just pull this in through and it's going to come undone. Just like that. And now it's loose. Another neat thing that you can do for a tarp is you can make a burrito, which is essentially like making a tent sleeping bag with your tarp. It's a nice way if you had to just set up something really fast, say inclement weather changed and you were lost and you needed to just jump in something without having to set up a shelter, an A-frame, you could make this burrito very, very fast. So I've already flipped it over where the side that I've folded is on the bottom, and then I want to fold this end in. Make sure it's folded in all the way. If you really want to make sure it's, you know, not gonna have anything come in, you can double fold it. And then just make sure that pressure kind of weights those ends down so nothing could come in from that end. And then all you want to do really with this type of setup, now just like a burrito, if I had to jump in, I can get all the way in and have a nice little shelter. One quick thing I want to add to this burrito, and we actually cut out a little bit of the clip of the folding process, but you want to make sure that you have a way to breathe where your head is in the burrito coming out. If you don't have a way to breathe out of the end in there where your head is, you're going to create a lot of condensation inside that tarp, and you're going to get cold because all that water is going to be attached from you breathing all over that tarp, and it's going to be really hard for you to stay warm. So always make sure your head at the very end there has a little bit of a sleeve or opening that you can breathe out of. Now we're getting into more of a natural shelter that you can use: debris, leaves, anything that's natural around you in the woods in case you didn't have a tarp. So the reason that I've picked this particular area, as you can kind of see with the camera moving around, we've got kind of a low sitting area. It's almost like a ditch, but it's really nice because you really want to try and figure out how you can mitigate wind when you're in a survival situation, especially if temperatures are cold. I chose this particular spot because I could make basically a nice platform across this ditch area. And then one thing to remember about this, you want to make sure if you do pick a ditch area, if there is inclement weather and a chance of rain, that you're not picking an area that could have water coming through it. So I've really made sure that this isn't an area that has water, you know, coming off the hillside and draining through. This is just a nice low sitting area that I was able to build a nice shelter over. So when building this type of shelter in this low area that I built it on, first I was looking for nice sturdy kind of large limbs that I could use to brace just like a roof for this area. So I picked some long limbs that were the right length for this low sitting area. That's the bottom part, that's my framing. So I've got probably 4 different long limbs, 1, 2, 3, 4, that I can stack logs over top of. So after you've got your nice frame set up for the roof, I like to kind of start with medium limbs. So I've picked medium-sized limbs kind of like this and laid them across. And you're gonna have to put a pretty good layer to start. And after you've picked these medium-sized limbs, you wanna go to more smaller limbs and fill in the gaps. So what you're doing is you're trying to kind of close all of these areas in with as many limbs as you can so that you have good coverage over this roof. Because at the very end, you're gonna add leaves to really give it that shelter look, to give it that density that it's gonna need to maybe keep rain from coming through or to keep wind from penetrating through. So you start large, medium, small, and then you wanna just pile leaves on top, as many as you possibly can, and have a good thick layer of leaves. I kind of half did the job that I would do in a survival scenario, but essentially I would want leaves to be this high if you really wanna have warmth inside your shelter and make sure that rain couldn't penetrate through that roof. So now that my shelter is finished, essentially you want to have a nice crawl space. If I really was worried about, you know, maybe anything getting into my shelter or wind coming through, like I said, again, this is in a low sitting area with embankments around it, so the wind is going to go up and over in theory. But if you wanted to close both ends, you can stack small limbs to kind of close in an area and then have a door. And if I had a big piece of bark, I could kind of close that area if I needed to. But essentially, I've got enough space to crawl right in. You want to make sure, you know, if you don't have a bivvy with you, that you have a nice layer of leaves underneath here that you can lay on so that you can kind of be off the ground and not be on the ground, because it's going to be colder on the ground. You want to have a nice layer of leaves under here and have plenty of room to get in and get out. So I could get all the way in here essentially and be underneath my roof. And hopefully I've built this shelter well enough where it's not going to leak through and you've got a shelter. So another thing, you know, say I had my dog with me on the hike and I needed some extra room. Jackson, come here. Come here. I've got enough room for the 2 of us. Come on. Lay down. Lay down. Lay down. Nice and cozy for 2 people. Ready to go. So it's easy to get lost in all the different kinds of shelters out there that you can build, because there are a lot of them to choose from. Knowing at least 3 or 4 basic types, 2 being what you could use a tarp for, the other 2 knowing how to build a debris shelter like you just saw me build in between those 2 embankments. The biggest key is to have determination and will. Having those 2 things will allow you to be creative in the moment and think through what your options are based off the resources that you have. Even looking at a fallen tree like this, if I wanted to try and build kind of an A-frame teepee on this, there's all kinds of scenarios where you can use the resources you have around you, including if there's moss, you know, or just a fallen tree like this. There's so many options you have while out there. Make sure you consider all of those options when building shelter and try to put together something that's simple, but it's going to make you feel comfortable in that scenario, because that's really the most important thing, is feeling comfortable and having the confidence to wake up the next day and get out of that situation. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that. Not the best video footage, but I think it's pretty good information. Let's see if I can skip. Wait, let me go ahead and skip ahead here.
Yeah, and Cole, real quick, we probably got about 10 minutes or so before the top of the hour, and we got a lot of good questions in the Q&A. So just wanted to throw that out there in case, just to see how far you were in your presentation.
Okay, let me just finish this and we'll get straight to it.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm actually going to skip this burrito. In my opinion, I would not have a tarp that's that big. I would look to try and get a bivy or a smaller tarp that you could pack really easily. It wouldn't be a whole lot of weight. Some people get a little too intense with it and they want these big tarps. It's not that you can't do it, but it's just going to take up more space in your pack. So think about that. We don't want to watch this, so let's continue on. So these are the types of shelters. So you have a tarp shelter like you saw me set up, which is on the bottom left in that picture. There's a debris shelter, which is on the top right. You can see that he used a lot of pine needles to pile over a A-frame that he built, and then he built a little crawl space to get into in the very front where he had pine needles stacked all the way around it. And he did that basically just to allow for a ton of insulation and would allow you to stay warm in that. There's an open shelter or lean-to. There's an A-frame, teepee variation. There's a lot of different kinds. And like I said in that video, you just want to get creative with the resources around you. And if you did bring a solar bivy, I would just jump in that if you had to and worry about a fire. If you didn't bring that and you did have a tarp, then set up an A-frame. We're going to skip that with the time that we have. So again, what does the shelter provide? It provides a base camp, home, a feeling of safety, warmth. It's going to be physiologically beneficial because it'll allow your body to calm down, give you that sense of hope that you need to wake up that next day, and some empowerment to really keep you going. Good qualities. It's wind and waterproof, hopefully, if you've built it right. If you're doing it naturally, you really want to stack those leaves and pine needles on. It's going to be warmer. And it also might be cooler if you're in a hot setting and you just need to get into the shade. And it's very important to think about, weather, water. Widowmakers are falling down trees or trees that are still hanging that you could use to build a shelter onto. Also thinking about animals in the area. If you really need to close that shelter off where nothing could get in and you want to feel protected, think about if there's bears or if there's any other animals that you could worry about, predators. It'd be good to be in a shelter that's completely closed off. And like we talked about, tarp, e-bivy, debris, A-frame, all types of shelters. All right, Sunshine. Do you want to hit them with that second polling question and then we'll get straight to the questions, or do you want to go ahead and open up the dialogue?
Yeah, sure. Let's ask us another polling question.
One more.
All right, so guys, just to make sure you haven't fallen asleep, you're still paying attention, we're going to post another question, and then we'll start answering your questions. So right now, if forced to spend the night outside, what's the first thing you should do?
We hope you were listening.
Yeah, and if you were listening, you should get this answer correct. All right, I got 50%, 60%. Come on, 70% voted. Up to 75% voted. Cole, it's looking really good. I know you can't see it yet, but people were paying attention to you. All right, I got about 85%. I'm going to end this poll, guys, and show you the results.
Boom. That's what we're talking about.
And remind them why. Why is building the shelter the first thing you should do? Yeah.
So, the reason you want to build a shelter is for, we talked about it just a minute ago. It's going to give you that calmness, that stability, that will to want to wake up the next day because you were able to get into a warm area or get under something to feel like you have a home base, to feel like you have a chance of being away from the elements, whether that's predators, whether that's the wind, water. That sense of stability that a shelter can provide is very, very important to your survival. So that's why they say to start with that and then look into what the next options might be.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. And then, the rule of threes as well, the 3 hours, the 3 days in the 3 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. So John has a question. How do you overcome panic? And several people thumbed that up, so it bumped it up to the top. I think it's a valid question. If you find yourself lost in the woods, like how do you overcome that worry, that panic of like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do?
They say the first thing, and we get back to that STOMP acronym, is sit down and breathe, close your eyes. I actually did this when we did our wilderness survival class outside, when we put it to practice. I think I was able to give everybody a chance to go find their own space and just sit down and take in their surroundings and just let yourself be quiet. Don't let your mind run wild. Breathing through your nose is going to allow oxygen to really, slow the body down, calm yourself down. Breathing is super important. Those are things that I've been taught for wilderness survival, is breathing, even closing your eyes for a little bit, breathing, finding that sense of calmness. And then after that, opening your eyes and really starting to pay attention to the details, looking at trees, looking at the land layout, whether you're on a hill or if there's a mountain in front of you, if there's a river that you can hear, if there's birds chirping, there's all types of things that you can think about to allow yourself to maybe regain memory on how you got to where you are. So that's my advice to it.
Nice. All right. Next question is from Olivia in Salem, Oregon, no less. Thanks for joining us. What are sources for paper maps? Because, phones may not work for very long. John recommended carrying that battery pack, a solar portable pack, kind of like you did, to recharge the phone if you need to. But can you pull up maybe real quick a source of paper maps for Olivia to find?
So if you got on the National Parks Maps website, there's an npmaps.com or an nps.gov, find a national park. You can find the park that you're wanting to go, and you typically can find the map on that park website. There'll be a link or a way to buy it through the park website. Looks like with this quick search that I did, nationalparkmaps.com is going to have all of the major national parks. If it's not a national park and it's a state park, typically you can get on your state park website, whether that's the Cumberland Trail. I know that the Cumberland Trail system has put together a website for backcountry permits, and they also have all of their maps for each area on there. And you can download those. And sometimes you can find them at your local outfitter in REI, possibly a Rock Creek. They might have most of the classics in that town that you're going to the outfitter at. But that's why I know to answer that.
Yeah, great answer. I think going to your local retailer outfitter is, especially for your specific area, is the best place to go, unless you're going to like a national park or a state park. And usually you can find those online, download and print ahead of time. So great question, Olivia. Thank you. Michael wants to know, when it comes to compasses, what is a good one? We have a lot of magnetic issues from around Alberta, all the way up in Canada. Dang, wow. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Wow. Best compasses. Well, I don't have a great answer for that. I really don't even know the brand that I have. Best compasses of 2021, Gear Junkie. You could get on that website and kind of see what you think. I don't have a great answer for that, Michael, and I apologize. I'd be happy to do some research and kind of see what the experts are saying about the best compass. It looks like from just a quick search that I'm doing, the best overall compass is the Sunto M3D leader compass, which is very similar to the compass that we have here at Outdoor Chattanooga. Do you know if we have is it the Sunto compass Sunshine? I can't remember, to be honest with you.
I do not know either, but yeah, I think that's good. Just kind of directing to a basic web search where actual Gear Junkies review these things and put them to the test in different environments. Because again, we're located out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so what we're doing here may not work for Alberta, Canada, or Salem, Oregon, any of the other places you guys are tuning in from. And so I think a site like Cole has pulled up is kind of a good resource to do some research and maybe pick one that's best for, your environment, whether it's super cold, super hot, super muggy, whatever the conditions may be.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for the question, Michael.
yeah, and I did type in that website that you looked up. So it is living there if you guys want to take that website and go look something up. And we will share all this information with you guys via a follow-up email at the end of this workshop. Olivia from Salem, Oregon again wants to know, how do you keep water from running down under you? So if you do build an outdoor shelter, how do you keep water from running underneath you?
That's a good question. Well, so the area that I picked in that video was just really surrounded by some embankments. This was an old logging area where they probably had dug up some roads and piled dirt around that area that I was at. And there was a stream over nearby that you can very obviously pick out, that you could see there's a ditch and there's obvious, signs of water flowing down that. I didn't see any signs or symptoms of the area that I was picking for that shelter having any water. But so to answer your question, you always want to try and get off the ground, and you actually could put some small limbs. I would probably start with medium limbs and then fill it in with the small limbs, and then put a huge layer of leaves over top of that so that you can get off the ground. And then if water for some reason was saturating the ground and it was coming in any way, just in the ground, you would be off the ground and you would be on some limbs that hopefully the water would flow under. Or at least if the water was saturating the dirt, you would be off the ground on some leaves on tree limbs, so you wouldn't be on the ground. It's the best way that I can answer it. But also just keeping in mind, don't pick an area where you see a ditch nearby your shelter. If there was to come a monsoon or a lot of rain, it could fill it twice what it might look like it could hold, and it could come into your shelter. So just stay away from any area that looks like it holds water.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's a great way to answer that, Cole. Just making sure you're not in the lowest lying area possible. All right, we got Michael back. He wants to know, is there a standard topographical slope rise in feet? The video said between 40 and 80 feet. I want to know if there's a standard slope rise on those topographical maps. And I don't know that there is. I think it varies, doesn't it?
I think it does vary from the research that I've done and the classes I've taken. I mean, they do say in the video that 80 typically is what you see. But yeah, I don't know the industry standard from a mapping perspective for professionals. I'm not sure what that standard is, but we can look it up. I could get back to you on it.
Yeah, and I think too, Michael, most of the maps that you have that are topographical will have the legend on it to let you know.
Yeah.
That way, it's specific to the map you're holding in your hand, instead of relying on a standard that may not be uniform throughout. So, Michael also wants to know, will iodine kill parasites?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I'm going to do a quick Google search. I think it will for some. I don't know if it will for all. Let's give that a quick Google search, though.
And then while you're looking at that, also wants to know, would you use sticks or something to hold open the burrito? You'd mentioned kind of keeping the opening so you can breathe underneath the burrito.
Yeah. You could just leave a little bit of an opening where your head is just naturally going to be in that area that's open and you can breathe out of it. But yeah, you could use a stick, like you could prop it up with a stick if you wanted to get deeper into the burrito and have just that stick that holds it up. Hopefully it wouldn't fall, but pick one that's sturdy and maybe kind of jab it into the ground so it's staked. And then possibly if it has kind of a Y fork at the top of it, you could pin the tarp into it right there and it would just stay open. But yeah, that's what I would recommend. Jumping back to the question Michael had about parasites, I'm seeing that iodine helps with the following: kills all viruses, kills all fungus, and kills all parasites. So that looks to be the answer. And I'm sure depending on which iodine you buy in REI or wherever you buy it, just ask your gear junkie expert at that outfitter what they think about it, and if it is going to kill all of those viruses or parasites. It looks like that it does in most cases, but that could be a question for a gear expert.
Yeah, and Michael liked your answer. So yeah, I would definitely check with a gear expert at your local, outdoor retail store. They're going to be well versed in those kinds of things. And again, specific to your area, Michael, when you mention a certain river, obviously we don't deal with the same things in a different part of the world. So your local retail outdoor stores are the best resource for these kinds of things. So, but thanks for your questions. These are awesome.
Yeah, those are great questions.
All right, Jessica would like to know what could be used instead of leaves. We don't typically have that many leaves in the summer. Any other suggestions? Yeah.
Tell me can she share her? Well, she'd have to get in and type it again. It depends on the environment. It depends on where you're located. I mean, if you were in a desert environment.
She's in Alberta, Canada.
Oh, she's in Alberta.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I
would
would say
a lot of moss in Canada, Jessica. Moss is a great filler.
It is,
no
and
moss.
you can.
She said no moss.
Oh, no moss.
All right, you come up with something, Cole. What you got for her?
Well, if you have big Fraser firs, or if you have big pine trees with a lot of those thick needles on those trees, I've seen a lot of shelters in probably Squamish or British Columbia built shelters with the limbs from like a big fir tree or a pine tree, and just keep piling those limbs. You would have to cut them down or find ones that have fallen, keep piling those limbs on top of each other, and those can insulate pretty well. I've seen a lot of people use those limbs to build shelters and insulate the shelter. If there's no moss, I would probably go for the limbs. Maybe bark. If you found a particular tree that had rotted and there was layers of bark that you could pull off, you could use that to kind of close the outside. You could use dirt. I've seen people do that when they build like really in-depth cabin type shelters, but that would also require you building it in a way that allows you to pack it. And if it's really steep A-frame, it'd be hard to pack it in, and you'd have to have a lot of limbs densely packed together to be able to pack dirt. And that would also require you either having a tool, a shovel, or the will to want to use your hands and get a lot of dirt and pack the sides with dirt. Yeah. But it's the best answer I got.
Good. I think it answered it for her. All right. Do's and don'ts of picking a spot for a shelter. What are your basics? What are your go-tos?
Don'ts. So we kind of talked about it. Don't build a shelter in an area near a ditch or in an area that looks like it's had water erosion or just any kind of water exposure at all. Another don't, if you were on a ridge top and you were wanting to try and build your shelter in an open area, and usually open areas on a ridge top are going to be windy, so getting out of the wind in that area is going to be hard. I would try to seek a little bit more tree coverage if you could find it, get further down the hill a little bit where you could be away from the wind a little bit more, because the wind is going to change the temperature a lot most of the time, and that wind chill could change the temperature in 15 or 20 degrees, which could be life and death in some situations. And then do's, you do want to take in your surroundings. If you've really prepared, hopefully you have a solar bivvy or you have a tarp, and then you can think about which shelter you want to build with that. But if you don't, then that's going to require you to really take notice of your environment, the resources around you, and then try to pick an area that's going to be out of the wind, be away from water. And to really get in the weeds, if you're thinking about signaling for help, if you found yourself there for over 4 or 5 days and it came down to you signaling for help, you do probably want to try and be building a shelter near an area that could be open to either get a fire going to signal for help, or possibly be open enough that you could have an arrow or have some kind of signaling, signaling mechanism on the ground for someone to see from above in a helicopter. There's a lot of situations really, but the do's really just come down to what you either have or what you don't have and what you might need to find. And then thinking about the weather and the environment.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole. Elizabeth would like to know if you are going on commonly used trails where there are many people, are all these accessories necessary?
Okay.
Yeah, I think I can kind of chime in on that. Like, yes
Sure,
and
sure.
no, Elizabeth. It depends on how far you're going to go. Like, if you are in a well-traveled, well-versed area, and you're going for a short kind of hike, you're probably not going to end up lost, right? You're probably going to make it out and back, no problem. You probably don't need to carry all of that stuff with you. But if you're going to venture out a little farther, you're going to go by yourself. You're in a new space that you've never been to before. That's where you're going to want a little more prep, a little more planning, and carry a little more stuff for the just in case, worst case scenarios. So that's kind of a quick and dirty answer for you. We still got about 9 more questions, Cole, so I'm kind of rush through
Okay.
with you since we're a little past the hour. Appreciate you guys sticking with us. Michael would like to know, in the burrow that you made in the video, would you suggest using a burrito or use a tarp over the top of your leaves? Which method would be better?
For the natural shelter that I
Yes.
built.
Yes.
Well, so for that shelter, I would have closed it off. I would have put a lot more limbs to close off the crawl spaces to where there was only a very small space that I could come in. And I would have put a lot more leaves. If I had a tarp, I probably would have put it over the debris shelter that I built. I mean, why not? If you have it, use it to your advantage. You know what? I'd probably use the tarp as a burrito to get in as a sleeping bag. And if I had already built that shelter and I did have a tarp and I chose to not be to be under a tarp and I wanted to be in my debris shelter, I'd get in my tarp like a sleeping bag and then be under my shelter for added protection and warmth. And I could stuff that tarp full of leaves and have more insulation inside my tarp, like a sleeping bag essentially. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and that would be my preferred method too. I think I would want the burrito underneath the shelter. That kind of would be my preferred method, but again, it's personal preference. So hopefully that answers your question there, Mike. All right, Lyric. If you are for some reason in an area where the amount of leaves is not as dense, would grass suffice? Oh, and then he or she said, you can skip this question. We've already answered it. All right, sorry, I should have read all that ahead of time. All right, Liam, do you have tips for how to find water?
Yes. Man, I could get in the weeds on this one, but I'll try to just keep it short. So, man, it's hard to keep it short on this one. You can dig for water if you find an area that looks like there could be a ditch or there's been water passage through an area. You can dig in an area that looks like water has been. And if you dig deep enough and you let it sit for long enough, water will eventually rise to that area and you can find water that way. A lot of it has to do with the terrain too. If you were up on a ridge, oh man, I could easily get in the weeds on this one, but to try and just keep it simple, basically you can dig for water if you think there's water in an area or has been. If you know the area that you're in somewhat and you know there's a river that you could hear in the distance and you need water to survive, then I would suggest going to the water and following the river out if you knew that the river was going to go out towards an area that might be near civilization. But that question could get me going, and I better not answer too much of it. If you do want to tune into a more in-depth answer to that, I'd love to answer it deeper or give you some resources to answer that better.
Yeah, perfect. I like looking at maps ahead of time and if I'm going to go in a space, knowing that there is a water source nearby, a creek, a river, something to that effect. So checking the map ahead of time, that way you know there's a water source available. Unless you're hiking in a drought, which I found myself doing once, and then the water source was all dried up, which was unfortunate. So, yeah. Renaud says something that wasn't mentioned was to keep a lightweight vest that is a bright color, preferably with reflective parts. Also having a pair of gloves to protect your hands while you are building the shelter, and to help stay warm. That's, yeah, great advice, Renard. Thanks for jumping in and doing that. A lot of the common sense stuff that we know, sometimes we forget to mention. So right on point. All of those are important to have. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We got a lot of thank yous, a lot of thanks. They had to jump off. So, man, we appreciate you guys interacting with us tonight. I think I have a couple more. Michael just wanted to mention that he was told crawling under a pine, cedar, or coniferous tree, hopefully I said that right, to take immediate refuge under the large boughs. That'll protect you from wind, snow, and critters. Your trees are probably a lot bigger than ours, Michael, up in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, I assume they are.
Yeah. We got another thank you from Ontario, Canada. And I loved Kenna. Kenna said that we kept her 5 and 8-year-old hooked, and they're going to practice building their survival shelter tomorrow.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
Yeah,
and
I would love to see pictures of that. So I hope she'll email them to us.
Please do. And I can remember as a kid doing that all the time in my backyard with my brothers. We loved to build shelters. And that was before I even knew that it could be for survival. We just like to hide out in them and play hide and seek. So go do it. It's a great thing to do. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Thank you guys for chiming in your own knowledge and expertise. We claim to be experts, but we always learn from you guys too. So thanks for sharing what you know. Let's real quick, I'm going to try to share my screen. Go ahead and pick a winner live on screen for the Map and Compass navigation course with REI. So one of the topics we discussed today is if you don't get lost, you don't need this skill. And so we're going to actually give away a Map and Compass course taught by experts at REI. So you can use a topographical map and a compass to navigate in the backcountry. So let me make sure I'm on the right spot. Yep. All right. Share my screen. And then guys, we will follow up with emails and include the presentation slides, the recorded video. We did record ourselves tonight, so we'll share all that with you. And the list of 10 essentials, which I think Cole included on one of the presentation slides, but any information that you want from us that we didn't include in the follow-up email, just respond back and we'll get that to you, okay? We want to encourage you to attend our upcoming workshops. We got Camp Cooking 101 coming up in 2 weeks on February 23rd, I believe. And then we'll finish in March with 2 more sessions, one on Backpacking 101 and bicycle maintenance, how to fix a flat. So go find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, subscribe, like, do all that stuff. It helps us be able to continue to do the things that we love doing, which is being outside and sharing that love with you guys. So I'm going to click to spin. I entered everyone's name that had filled out the sign-in sheet. One lucky winner is going to get a Map and Compass course. All right, Ms. Marcia. Woo. All right, I'm going to email that to you. Thank you guys so much for attending tonight. We appreciate it. If you guys have any follow-up questions, I'm going to email it you. You can ask those to me, and if I don't know the answer, I'll direct it to Cole. And if he doesn't know it, he'll confer with Google, right?
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Y'all enjoy your evening, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks for Camp Cooking 101.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. You did really good tonight, man. We appreciate you.